Housing prices are rising across the country. The Center Square's investigation into daycare fraud in the state of Washington, and how much the Colorado Attorney General's office wants to charge the Center Square for public records. All that and more. Welcome to The States, powered by the Center Square. It's Thursday, July 16th, 2026. I'm Dan McCaleb, executive editor of the Center Square, filling in for regular host Greg Bishop. The Center Square investigative reporter Adam Herbets has been trying to find out how much in taxpayer money the Colorado Attorney General's office is spending on outside attorneys to sue the Trump administration and others. But the AG wants to charge the Center Square thousands of dollars to access these records. Joining me to discuss this is Adam Herbets himself. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for participating. When you initially asked for these records, they quoted you a figure in the hundreds of dollars. But then they came back and upped that to thousands. Tell us more.
Yeah, we're talking about a 17x increase here. That's rounded down, by the way, not rounded up. But $289.59 upgraded to $5,129.88. And the big question is, why the big paywall? I was asking that question even when we were talking about hundreds of dollars, especially because Phil Weiser has been talking about these lawsuits for a long time. We're talking about more than 60 lawsuits against the Trump administration. It was 66 when we started all this. We're up to 69 or 70, depending on how you count it now. And the full list is even kept behind a paywall. So it's a big part of his campaign for governor, and yet it doesn't seem like he wants us to have free access, at least, to knowing how much it's costing taxpayers.
Now, you tried to reach out to the Attorney General, Phil Weiser himself, which, as you noted, he's also running for governor as a Democrat in the state of Colorado. What happened specifically when you reached out to him?
Well, the hope was that because he's made this such a big part of his campaign, because it is literally the first thing on the Colorado Attorney General's office website, that he would say, you know what, we are allowed to grant a fee waiver or at the very least a fee reduction because these records are in the public interest. So we're going to do that. That's not what happened. He opened the email. We got the read receipt from our email inbox. He then forwarded it to one of his coworkers, and that coworker wrote back a pretty lengthy response, basically saying, and this is not a quote, this is me paraphrasing, but the essence of the email was, don't hate the player, hate the game. The Colorado Open Records Act does not require us to cap the fees in any way. The Colorado Open Records Act does not require us to even meet with you. It does not require us to answer your questions. And that's all a little bit discouraging when we're getting those same types of questions and lack of answers from the public information officer. It's literally in his title. His job is to provide public information, to work with the media on these types of requests. He's basically saying the law doesn't require me to do that.
Adam, one of the sources you talked to get reaction to this was former chair of the Colorado Republican Party, Dick Wadhams, who told you he was shocked that the AG's office won't just release the documents, given Weiser's been bragging about standing up to the Trump administration during his campaign for governor. What else did he and others have to say about this?
Yeah, you see it right there on your screen. He even used the D word. If Weiser's going to brag about all these lawsuits, he damn well ought to make the information public. He was upset, but there was also criticism from the left, especially before Weiser won his primary. His opponent in the primary was making comments along the lines of Colorado needs a governor, not a lawyer. Now, of course, after Bennett lost the primary, he stepped back and said, we need to unite as a party, and he's going to endorse his Democratic counterpart. But the criticism is coming from the left, it's coming from the right, it's coming from the center. This is not really a partisan issue if you only look at it from the perspective of taxpayer money. Obviously, it becomes partisan if you start making decisions based off the fact that these are Trump lawsuits. But it doesn't matter whether they're Trump lawsuits or if they're other lawsuits. This is public government. These are public records. And by putting a $5,000 plus price tag on public records, it's basically telling the public that unless you got a whole lot of money, you're not going to get to find out what happens in your own government.
Adam, one last question for you. How do public record laws in Colorado compare to other states?
Well, obviously it depends. We actually published a map in our article. If you go to thecentersquare.com and read and scroll down and see that map, there are a large number of states, particularly neighboring states to Colorado, that require the government to, at the very least, work in good faith with requesters to help them identify records, to help them figure out how to get records maybe at a less expensive price tag if it is a large number of records. That doesn't happen in Colorado. And in fact, in Colorado, the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition, who we interviewed in this story, they talked about comparing it to Ohio, where their stance is it's already their job to be transparent. We have the First Amendment for a reason. These are already government employees being paid a salary to provide public records. So why add an additional price tag on top of it? Obviously, Colorado feels differently. And that's why the Colorado Assistant Attorneys General will send emails saying the law doesn't require us to work with you, so either pay the price tag or drop the request.
Thank you, Adam, for your coverage on this story. You can read more at thecentersquare.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the States, powered by the Center Square. Housing prices are rising across the U.S. We'll now go to the Center Square publisher Chris Krug and PhD economist Orphe Divounguy, who discuss this in their latest episode of Everyday Economics. Let's have a listen.
$440,600 is an all-time high, but prices only rose 1.8% over the year, while inflation's running near 3.8%. So how is a quote-unquote record high house actually losing value, and why should that gap matter more to a family than the word record? What do you say, O?
I mean, you said so many things, man. Look, at the end of the day, people are paying more for less.
Okay.
And that's what's going on. And a part of the problem is the supply shocks that we've had, right? So we had it really all started with, right, during before the current administration, the record spending pushed inflation higher. Okay, that was on the demand side, but even before that, we had COVID. COVID was a major supply shock. Inflation soared. Then we had the massive stimulus package where basically the government decided to send checks to people that didn't even need the money. By the way, some of the stimulus was absolutely necessary, okay? But, I got a check and I really didn't need it, right? And lots of people like this across the economy got a check in the mail during COVID who didn't really need it, and they either saved it, bought a second house or something, bought a new car, or basically, and some of the savings, by the way, some of the ones who saved it spent it, right, over time. And those savings have dried out now. But the bottom line is this, you fast forward, we get inflation starts to come down, and then we get tariffs. And so who's really paying for the tariffs, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really important, right? The tariffs do not just hit consumer prices all at once. They move through the economy in stages. A tariff is a tax on an imported good, right? But a company importing that good does not necessarily raise its price right away the next morning. Businesses have choices. They can absorb the higher cost, accept lower profits. They can try to negotiate with suppliers. They can cut costs elsewhere. They can stop hiring. We got a little bit of that too. And they can raise prices eventually, right? And this process takes place over a long period of time. And now what we're seeing in today's economy is a combination of two things, two shocks. We're seeing the tariff shock from a year ago, And we're seeing the oil and gas prices, which, by the way, are starting to come down. Thank God for that, right? Although, of course, we got news over the weekend that the conflict is like, I don't even know what's going on. You know, there were some things that caused, the conflict to reignite, and I don't know what's gonna happen with gas prices as a result of that.
Right. There's less certainty there than there was.
Exactly. Just a week ago, right? And really great research from the New York Fed tells us nearly half of the businesses that directly pay tariffs say they still have price increases coming. And so, yes, we're at 4%, 4.2% inflation, and hopefully we get some relief on the gas front, hopefully. But with what's going on, I'm not so sure anymore. And at the same time, we have the tariff price increases that are still coming. So is inflation really going to come down? I'm hoping. Yes, a little bit this year. But, there's a lot of uncertainty around my forecast.
Yeah. Well, so here's what's kind of caught my eye. I mean, I like to go back and look at what we've talked about in the past and kind of like sort of, kind of use them as milestones. So last October, you told us housing would keep dragging inflation lower. You had rent easing to 1.8% this year. Now you and your colleagues at Zillow have it holding closer to 3.1%, with owners equivalent rent near 3.4%. That's a real reversal. What did you see that kind of flipped you? I mean, are you rolling along with the trend here, or is there data in the market that you're specifically zeroed in?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's very simple. It's what we're looking at in terms of asking rents, right? So if you look at apartments that are on the market right now, what you see basically is that, rent increases have started to firm up. Rent growth is no longer decelerating. And so if that continues, right, and things continue to move higher and higher and higher, right, and rents begin to reaccelerate. But when I say reaccelerate, I should really say normalize. Rent growth is really low right now. Sure. So if you see a normalization in rent growth, that will put some upward pressure on potentially on the CPI, because it takes time for asking rents to show up in existing leases, right? Remember, asking rents of rents that are currently on the market, people are looking and they're like, oh, all right, this is a new rental I'm going to get into, right? It's not an existing lease. It's a new lease getting ready to start. And so, in the CPI, which kind of proxies existing leases, you're likely going to see this upward shift. Now, here's the good news. The good news is that shift up is really, it's really at the beginning. You're not really seeing a big shift. You're seeing just the fact that there's no longer deceleration, right? Right. And so I think that's the good news. The bad news is if you do see, with builders pulling back on new construction, if you do see an acceleration, a decline in vacancy rates, which would coincide with an acceleration in rents, then that housing deceleration that was helping is no longer going to be a tailwind when it comes to seeing CPI come down.
Well, all right. So one last question. So this week tells us something. We have pending sales. Housing starts up to 1.31 million. Builder confidence coming out Friday. We're not anticipating great news there. If you're watching for the kind of the break in the market, the moment this stock market breaks one way or other, which one of those tips you off first, and what would it have to say?
CPI, of course. You cannot. Everything else is kind of pointing in the same direction. You have an economy that's kind of treading water. CPI is, where is inflation headed? Is inflation going lower Is inflation stuck around 4%? That is what I'm looking for, right? Can we get a lower than expected inflation reading? If we do, then yields could come down a little bit. And that means that everyday people will eventually see a slight easing in the cost of borrowing. If we do not see a lower than expected reading, or we see a higher than expected CPI reading, then we're going to feel more pain in the foreseeable future. For the foreseeable.
Well, thanks as always, Dr. O. That's Everyday Economics, part of the States, the Center Square's daily news magazine on YouTube and across streaming platforms.
Reporter Carlene Johnson and the Washington State team of journalists have been investigating daycare fraud in the state of Washington. Let's take a look.
Is there a daycare that's operated from here? There's not a daycare? Oh, did you used to have a daycare here?
No.
There's kids here now? Oh, none today? So I was trying to find out if this was a home daycare.
I don't have time to talk to you right now. I'm so busy.
I've not had a chance to take a look at that, but we'll after the fire.
Hi, my name's Carlene. I'm a reporter. I was trying to find out, is there a daycare here? We found millions in taxpayer dollars going to alleged home daycare providers across Washington state. But when we went to those addresses on multiple occasions, we found little to no evidence of daycare activity. In one case, a location that received more than $200,000 told us there was no daycare there at all. Was there a daycare, we asked, here in the past? The answer was no. Is there a daycare that's operated from here?
No.
There's not a daycare?
No.
Oh, did you used to have a daycare here?
No.
No? Okay. I was trying to find out if there was a daycare operation here.
Huh?
If there was a daycare
No,
here on this property. At this location, records show more than $200,000 in payments over 9 months. And updated figures on a government website show the facility is continuing in 2026 to receive monthly payments of between $20,000 and $28,000 just in the last few months. At another address receiving significant funding, we were told there were no children there that day. Oh, hi there. Hi, I'm a reporter. I have just been investigating some of the daycare operations in the area. Do you have a home daycare here? Huh? You do? Are you watching children today? Are you watching children today? The daycare here? Okay. There's kids here now? Oh, none today? But other days you do have kids here? At this address, 2 daycare providers using the same address received more than $1.3 million in taxpayer subsidies over a 9-month period. But when we visited, there were no visible signs of childcare activity. One of the daycares received on average more than $20,000 per month from December through March of 2026. The other childcare facility received anywhere from $72,000 to $122,000 between December of 2025 and March of 2026. Now, according to the Office of State Auditor Pat McCarthy, there is no confirmed fraud, but she does acknowledge serious gaps in oversight.
We haven't seen any evidence of fraud. But we're still in the process of doing the audit.
Now, according to the state auditor, over $413 million in child care payments could not be fully tracked. About $37 million in payments in 2025 alone were flagged as questionable. Now, many providers failed to provide required attendance records, making it difficult to verify how these funds were fully used. Many of them are receiving, hundreds of thousands of dollars over a few months' time in subsidies. So
have you reported that to DCYF or reported
here's the thing. It's not my job. It's right there, publicly accessible information. So I would say if you're auditing these large payouts, it would make sense. It's easy to see. You go to Child Care Aware, find the address or the name of the provider. Then you go to fiscal.wa.gov, type in the name of the provider, and boom, it comes up and shows, wow, he got $250,000 in 5 months last year. And it shows he cares for 6 kids at his home.
If you have a concern, there are people that you can give that information to. Give it, send it to us. You have a credible incidence, send it to us on our Hotmail line.
Publicly reporting it. I didn't put the physical house number on there.
One thing, I'm struggling with this because I think people are jumping to conclusions because of this.
With all due respect, this doesn't look well on your office. You're doing the audit right now. I'm happy to send you the fiscal.wa.gov screenshots that show a home daycare provider that's licensed for 9, shows he's got 6 openings, so 3 kids maybe, even if he's getting the max taxpayer subsidy if you've got babies, that's $2,200 a month. If you have that
concern, you should be sending it to DCYF.
And you should be investigating it, should you not? Honestly, the people are...
It's not... We don't investigate. I mean,
who does that?
We would have received the information, but we are not going... We, the auditor's office, do not physically visit
but if you're doing an audit right now, Adam, of these providers, why not include the big players where it's so obvious, like this might be fraud because this guy got $250,000 in 5 months last year. I mean,
we can provide you with information on how we select what payments we're auditing.
The public is demanding answers, and everyone is deflecting, saying we're looking at them. They're all audited. How could you possibly explain someone being given that much in taxpayer subsidies?
If it's a credible evidence, you have credible evidence that
you should. It's on the fiscal.wa.gov website.
You should be going to the Attorney General's office and
he said he wouldn't look into it. He said that's his client, DCYF, and they won't investigate. That's what I was told to my face. When I asked about oversight concerns, Governor Bob Ferguson refused to directly address the findings. Governor, I want to ask you, the state auditor came out this week with a report about some of the daycare overpayments and that sort of a thing, not calling it fraud, but saying they did see some things that were concerning. What is your office doing, if anything, to look into some of the very questionable payments, taxpayer subsidy payments?
I've not had a chance. We're trying to wrap up the budget process. I've not had a chance to take a look at that. I will after the time.
As reporters, we don't file complaints or conduct investigations ourselves. Our role is to document what we find and present it to the public. From there, it is up to state agencies and elected officials to take action. However, in this case, none of those officials, from the governor's office to the state auditor to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, have been willing to dig into this issue and to expose what appears to be, if not outright fraud, something questionable going on. The Attorney General's office represents state agencies, including the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, meaning its role is to defend those agencies, not independently investigate them.
Have you had any fraud complaints come into your office?
Fraud complaints related to what?
Related to DCYF.
We all watch the news, right? There's been a lot of reports on fraud that came into our office. Most of them are what I would view as pretty baseless allegations. But we take those allegations seriously. We work with our client agencies. Every state program that gets taxpayer dollars needs to work better with those dollars and make sure that we're treating those issues seriously. That is very different in my mind from allegations of fraud. And we want to make sure that there's a distinction between allegations of criminal fraud and allegations of just how we best use our taxpayer dollars.
With millions of taxpayer dollars flowing into these programs, questions remain about whether the system is being properly monitored and whether the state is catching these problems before or after the money goes out. At this point, it seems, although state officials, agency heads are well aware of the very large questionable payouts, they're unwilling to address it and instead have suggested that reporters including those from the center square, are out of line for asking questions and demanding answers. Though we know full well taxpayers are demanding accountability, and we endeavor to keep pressing for that accountability.
From my studio here in the great state of Texas, where it's been raining seemingly for days now, this has been The States, powered by the Center Square. Tune back in tomorrow for the next episode.